For the annual town meeting, which includes and was noticed in the paper, number 1, review the state of the town report, 2, review the 5-year capital plan, and 3, to receive all annual reports of the permanent boards, commissions, agencies, committees, and town's auditor report. According to our Madison Charter 2.1.1, we do not have a quorum of 150 tonight, and the annual report and the audit report are received. Having said that, we have a PowerPoint presentation from our selectwoman, Peggy Lyons, and we also have people on hand to answer questions. So we'll go ahead with that.
Okay, well, I want to welcome everybody tonight. Appreciate you coming out. This is an annual presentation. This is now my 6th State of the Town presentation. And it follows a similar format. I know when you look at PowerPoint slides, you'll be like, oh my God, there's a lot of words on there, but I tend to do that because a lot of people don't attend the actual meeting. So I try to put more detail on the slides. And I try to cover a lot of different things. This is not just about budgets or taxes or specific projects. It's just trying to give you an overall picture of everything that's going on in the community. So what we'll cover is obviously all the great things about Madison and some of the challenges we face, what progress we've made this last year, a little bit about the budget, and we're still in the budget process right now, so we don't have a proposed budget for this next year. The board just recommended one going forward, but we'll have that process. We'll talk about our debt profile, capital plan, and some of the big projects going on, and then kind of some of the things that we're going to be working on in the future. Just talking real quickly, community strengths. We all know Madison is a wonderful place to live. We chose to live here. We've got a lot of great amenities, and it's a great community. We work well together. And on top of that, we have strong finances. So, the town has a favorable economic profile. And then I think we don't need to talk much about how great the town is because we all love living here and think it's a great community. Challenges, I think that, trying to figure out, do I look at my notes or do I look at, I think it's going to look at this. One of the big issues is obviously we're a coastal community, so we're dealing with climate change, rising sea levels, and that's impacting more and more of our neighborhoods. And actually, some of our really most desirable, most dense neighborhoods in town are in a coastal zone. And maybe I shouldn't say desirable because all of Madison is desirable, but some of our higher value properties are down along the coastline. So we do have like a risk factor there that we have about 40% of our grant list is focused and concentrated in an area that is vulnerable to climate change, although the entire town is impacted by climate change as well. So that's a big challenge, and we're trying to do things to address that. We also have limited public infrastructure. We don't have sewer systems. We have some public transportation, but not a lot of transportation going out throughout the entire town. A lot of it is concentrated more in the southern end of town. And then we're going through a wastewater review. We're looking at different barriers to entry that development might have in town, and also just struggles that people are having within the community because of some of the infrastructure limitations we have. We've had to spend a lot of money in the last couple of years, and part of that is we had a backlog of projects, and historically we maybe didn't invest as much as we should have in our existing facilities. So we're starting to see a lot of that come through the pipeline now. We've deferred a lot, and now we're trying to catch up. And so through the Madison School Renewal Plan and other things in our capital plan, we're kind of moving things forward, and obviously that's cost us money. It required us to finance some of this through the debt markets. So that's been a bit of a challenge for us. And then we're in a period, continue to be really since COVID, a period of economic uncertainty. But I think we also have another layer going on right there with some of the federal funding that's happening. We also have a lot of people in town that work for the government, so people are really being impacted, and there's a lot of uncertainty about their future, their jobs, grants. We have a lot of people working at universities that are reliant on federal funding. And then there's inflation concerns. So there's just a lot out there right now that is unpredictable, and that's going to have an impact on us. Housing affordability is probably one of the top issues that we keep hearing from our community, how expensive housing is. People can't afford to stay here, or they can't afford to move somewhere else within the community, or move into the community, or have their children move back here. So there's just a lot of challenges with housing. We have high medium home value, and we have high land value. So that's a good thing in the sense that we've invested in our community and we have a valuable asset that we may own, but it's challenged to sustain it, and it's a challenge for other people to move to our town. And then we have a need for greater housing diversity, and that drives costs as well, because 92% of our housing is single family. And our residents have changing needs now. People are looking for other types of housing choices. And we have an aging population somewhat, although we're seeing a resurgence in our kindergarten enrollments at our elementary school. So we're going through some demographic shifts, but overall Connecticut is an aging population, and we're following similar trends as we see across the state. And I think we just have a lot of different competing interests right now in the community, that people have different views about how they want to see town funding, where it should be focused. So those are all things that the town has been working on. If you look going forward in 2023, we passed a strategic plan, we adopted it, and we're now trying to follow. Oh, I gotta do my thing. Yes. So we're now trying to look at all our town initiatives and align that up to the strategic plan. So these things along on the left side are what we call key focus areas, and I encourage you all to look at the strategic plan that's on the town website. But this outlines kind of key areas that the town, when we adopted this, we're trying to focus on it. And so all I did here, and I won't go through all of these, but just to highlight that all the different initiatives kind of fall in these different buckets. And so the staff is really working hard to try to follow this kind of guideline that the town adopted through that process. And so we're tackling each of the issues that were raised in the strategic plan and trying to find solutions. So there's a lot there, and you're welcome to read them later. I won't go through them, but it'll just show you that there's a lot going on in terms of a lot of the projects we're working on. They tie into the strategic plan. They're just kind of not pulled out of thin air. There's a purpose and there's a reason that we're working on some of these things or funding some of these things. Okay, going on to budget trends. Just want to highlight, this does not include what we're forecasting for the next year, but overall, I would say we've seen on average, this last year we see quite an increase in revenue because of the revaluation, but overall our revenue has grown on average at 2%. But our town operating budget, which I'm proud to say, has stayed pretty a low growth number. Over the last 3 year, this is a compounded annual growth rate average of 2%. And I think what I've really tried hard to do is slow down the growth of the operating budget. So, rather than, it's that recurring core budget. How do we manage that better and reduce it? So when we've added something, we always try to reduce somewhere else. So if there's a new position added, we've usually cut hours somewhere else or redeployed a staff member. So it's trying to slow the growth of the operating budget. I think I came in here, that operating budget was growing at 7%. So every year we've tried to chip away at that. And when we talk about the budget presentation, you'll see the longer term trend. We've tried to keep that operating budget growing at a slower rate each year. But on the flip side of that, we've seen the capital budget has had to grow because we didn't invest in the past. So we've been focusing a lot more on continuing to put more money into capital projects. And then you can also see the debt service obviously is rising and has risen because of some of the referendum projects that we passed. We're starting to take on some of that financing. But I think overall, we've had a modest budget increases, and our mill rate has generally stayed below 2% on an average basis. And if you look back here and look at a 3-year compounded, and what compounded means, it takes into account the time value of money. So it's not an actual change, but it accounts for the time value of money. It's significantly less than inflation that we've seen in the last couple of years. So we've done everything we can to keep these increases down. And then obviously we're seeing our financing costs go up because of the referendum projects. Going on to the next slide, this talks a little bit about our debt. We've done now, since the referendum passed, we've done 2 debt bond issues. This last one, we issued $30 million in 1-year notes. So what we typically do is we go out and do a 1-year note to start funding projects, and then we swap that out with long-term bonds. So we issued almost 26 million of long-term bonds in December. And most of this is related to the new school project, but we do have $6.7 million in debt that we issued due to Academy project as well. But overall, we're still keeping down our debt service and following our regulations that the Board of Finance has set in terms of how much of our budget we can spend on interest expense. So we're still well below that. Our debt service will peak in 2030, and you can see that in this graph, and then it'll start going down. So what we've been doing is planning for that. We always look out over 10 to 20 years, really, when we do our financing profile, and we look at how we finance our projects. And we're always trying to make sure that we soften the blow of any kind of interest expense as it ramps up. And I'll talk a little bit about more the Madison investment plan, which we talk about every year, and how we're managing all that. This is the capital plan, looking out over the next 5 years, and you can kind of see the buckets and a breakdown. So this does not include, obviously, this does not include the referendum projects, and it also doesn't have the net cost, because a lot of the projects in the capital plan, a number of them have grant offsets as well, where a grant might be paying for half of the project or a quarter of the project. This is just kind of the gross project value. But you can see a breakdown that in addition to the bonding, school bonding projects, there's still about 28% of the pie, of the capital that we're spending on this pie is going to education projects, and the rest are going to other things. So as education has been mostly bonded for, we're starting to see more town projects take over the capital plan over the next 5 years. More town projects are coming into this. And this is an extensive process that never ends. We review projects all the time. I submit kind of a recommended capital plan in October to the CIP committee. The CIP committee deliberates in November and December. They make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen and then and Board of Finance, and then ultimately the spending for the next year goes to the voters. It's a planning document though, and that's one thing I want to highlight. We try to make good decisions every year, but things change. Stuff happens, a roof starts leaking that we didn't think was going to leak, or a cost of something went more than we expected, so we might need to rethink how we're going to do a renovation to something. So that capital plan is guidance, and it's targeting, and it's planning, but it's not stuck in stone, so we always every year have to revisit it and shift things around. The world changed, our needs change, and so, but it's really important that we do it, and it helps us keep ahead of the game all the time in terms of planning for budgeting purposes. Challenges to, I guess I get to talk about the good stuff, and then I'll talk about the challenges. Okay. The good thing is we're getting a lot done now, and these things take a long time. Things could go into CIP 10 years ago, and it might be considered low priority. It might get pushed aside. We may not have enough funding for it, but eventually they work their way through the system, and then we try to actually get them done. And so I think I'm really proud. We have a great team here, our facilities team, our director of Beach and Rec, who oversees a lot of the projects under his area of expertise. We're accomplishing a lot. We also had the benefit of having ARPA money come in. So that allowed us to pick off a lot of things out of our capital plan and pay for it through money that came from the federal government. So that assisted us. So when we see all these projects going on, we're not paying for all of that through local tax dollars. Yes, we are paying for it through federal taxes, but locally, a lot of it has been assisted funding that we received from other sources. So just to highlight, the tennis courts had been in CIP probably 10 years, finally got done. We paid for that entirely through ARPA. The field lights that were added, that was actually a partnership with Little League and then ARPA funding to get that accomplished.
20 years old, too.
20 years old, right. I will say recently, the senior center dining room renovations, there were problems in the kitchen that we had to repair, as well as some issues with the flooring. Fortunately, there was a grant that came up, and so that didn't have to go into CIP. We were able to pay for that through a state grant that came out. That was their ARPA funds, I think, and they had dedicated it to senior centers. The downtown center project, that's 20 years, right? We finally got those poles down. And so that was finally completed for that phase. We're now going to be ramping up to finish it to go all the way to 79. But that was another one that was funded through CIP and state grants over many years. But it was a partnership between the state and the town in terms of funding it. Sidewalks that were completed on Woodland Road, that was also, there was some CIP money in there and a number of state grants. And this list is also included in the CIP book. I think that it highlights all the different projects and how they were paid for. The town campus HVAC system, here, this geothermal project, we have a new heating system now in Town Hall. That's been on the books for at least 10 years, I think, with CIP. That is now finally completed. And that was a combination of CIP funding, ARPA money, and then we actually just got $300,000 back as a utility rebate from Eversource for that because it was, met energy efficiency goals. So, and we're hoping that we're going to get some federal funding back, although that is really up in the air now. We were expecting $800,000 in tax credit money that we should have received because we put in a geothermal system here. We might not get that now, unfortunately, with the change in administration. Bauer Park Farmhouse, that was in there for a long time. We finally got that done with CIP. The town campus gym floor, that's been a problem hanging around for a long time. We applied for a state grant, got it done, got the grant and got it done this last year. Exchange field, that's been well needed for a long time, those fields. That was a CIP project that had been in at least 5 years into the CIP. And then Garvin Point, which has been around probably 10 years. And we kept getting priced out of it because it kept growing in expense. We're finally in the middle of that project. They're going to be completed by May of this year. And they're pretty much moving along really well, keeping track. So, and that was funded through a combination of CIP and a state grant that we received. So this is, I think, a really incredible list. It's a lot of stuff that had been in a backlog for a long time. And I just think the staff has done a phenomenal job of finally getting these projects moving forward. And with all the board support, they get these completed. And fortunately, we had other resources, so we didn't have to put it all through the CIP, the Madison budget, and we were able to tap all these other funds. So if I talk about challenges, then obviously we want to keep moving along these projects so we don't get a backlog again, but that's also challenging because we've had to finance some of the school improvements through issuing bonds. And so that's going to create an issue from the budget. So we're trying to do both basically and balance it in a thoughtful way moving forward. And I think now when you layer in some of the economic uncertainty and we have, and I'll talk a little bit, the problem with the federal grants, that's going to make us have to rethink some things. We're going to have to see how this is going to impact projects in the capital plan, as well as things that are funded from federal funds. So we might have to make some tough decisions on projects. And unfortunately, we're just in limbo. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But the other thing is just the school still has other maintenance needs. Everybody talks about the bigger school project maintenance plan that when we went out to referendum, everybody knew there was also still this other backlog of projects. So we're kind of working through those and we're trying to do as good a job as we can. And once again, a lot of credit to our new facilities leader and construction manager, finding ways to do that cost effectively. And then we've started a facilities committee that's going through looking at all the properties that are going to be vacated and all the town properties and come up with a thoughtful master plan moving forward about what to do with some of the other buildings in town and how to use them. So that's going to be a lot of the conversations I think we're going to be having. I talked earlier about the Madison investment plan. We've talked about this many times over the last 4 years, and it's really trying to use all the tools in the toolbox that we have to try to keep budgets, growing in a slower rate and being able to still fund things appropriately so we can get projects done. And so it's using both the federal and state grants. It's also using, we have a very big undesignated fund balance now, a historic number. We're now at $24 million. So trying to tactically use that also to just kind of keep getting these projects done. Let's try to get some of this stuff done, use either fund balance or grants so we don't have to put it through CIP. Because CIP requires an annual contribution out of the budget. So that's what you would have to pay for annually through your taxes. That's all out of that now. So we're trying to fund it through other ways. And one of the things we did was we put money, the ARPA money, we used $3.2 million. And I know there's been a lot of discussion about paying for operating costs with ARPA. The state is struggling with that now. They funded maybe some things that were more operational with their ARPA funding, we as a board made a decision, we weren't gonna fund ongoing operating expenses with ARPA money. It was all project oriented for the town or community oriented. And I think that served us well. So we've spent over $3 million on funds that were in capital, which I just talked about in the other one. We also took some appropriations out of the fund balance and infused it into the capital plan. And those were through town meetings. So that included $3.5 million. And then we also put more money into the fire pension fund, because what that does is we have to make actuarial contributions every year through the budget to pay for the pensions. And so the more money we put into the investment pool, that allows us, that might help us not have to pay as much in our annual contributions. So we did those, I think last year, we did over $1 million. And I'll just talk a little bit about ARPA again, because I think we forget what a huge benefit this was to our community. It helped from a capital standpoint, paying for capital projects that otherwise we would have had to pay for through our local taxes. We also did a lot of great things for the community in terms of funding specific needs in the community. Then there were some kind of smaller projects, but it was just a really, I think, helpful thing to help us reset ourselves in terms of our investment in our facilities throughout town. And then we're going to put together, there's a list of all the ARPA projects. I think it's in the the CIP book, but we're also going to put together a little summary so people understand where all the ARPA money went and how it benefited the town. This is just to highlight the grants. I've talked about a lot. We were very aggressive. And Dr. Cook talked a little bit about that on the school side, trying to get a higher reimbursement rate. We've also been very aggressive at trying to go after grants. So we have, over, almost $15 million in state and federal grants that we've gone after to help with a lot of these projects. So that means the town isn't paying either any of the cost, or the town is paying a portion of the cost or shared cost for these projects. And I think this is all these are really valuable projects, and there's a lot of detail on that, but I think it's just fantastic that we've been able to tap this as a resource to move some of these projects forward. But the downside is we're in a situation now where we relied on, went after federal grants. We have over $10 million in federal funding that we were accounting for when we looked at a lot of our projects. And unfortunately, we're in a period now of uncertainty with what's happened nationally. We received notification from different agencies that our grants are pending or under review for certain criteria that the Trump administration felt was more in line with their vision. Unfortunately, it's going to create some issues for some of our projects. It might result in delays until we get approval. And I want to highlight that most of these, except for the USDA Academy grant, these are signed contracts that we signed with the federal government. So this isn't speculative. These aren't applications. They aren't grant awards. They're signed contracts that we have with the federal government. And that's why when you read in the paper about courts, it's like contract law. But unfortunately, that's not how things are being managed right now. So you're getting these notifications. And so it's really hard for us to plan to take steps when we're being told you may not get reimbursed if you spend any more money on this project. So to highlight how important these projects are, one is our Firehouse Expansion Emergency Operations Center project, which is at the downtown, and it's adding bays to accommodate more equipment that we have for Madison Hose. And part of that was to set up an emergency operations and training center down there. We do not have a dedicated emergency operations center. It's a $2.5 million federal grant. So we're in design phase, and then eventually that design phase will then go into bidding out for construction. And we don't know if we can do that right now because of the information that we've received, the communications we've received from the federal government. Department of Energy, the emergency shelter grant at Polson. We received $1 million grant as part of the project going on at Polson. We do not have an adequate emergency shelter for storms and things like that to happen here. We have the town campus gym. It does not have full facilities to account the town if we have a major catastrophe here. It doesn't have air conditioning. We've had elderly people there, and it's been 90 degrees in the gym. We only have limited bathrooms. There's no kitchen facilities. So there was a study group, I think Scott was part of that identified Polson as the best option for a shelter for the community. We went after a grant to pay for the generator. We're supposed to go out to bid for that grant, for that generator in March. We're pending now. If we don't do that, if we don't hear back, that could delay the project probably a year because it's driven by this timeline for the schools. We have a social worker position that is funded 100% by a grant. That was a decision the boards took. They were very supportive of the position, but they said, let's test run it on a grant. We received notice from the DOJ, pending, but we are getting reimbursed right now. So we're hoping that will get clarified. But that's another one that might impact us. Academy, we voted to accept the grant a couple weeks ago. We submitted everything to the state or to the federal government. We're in pending mode. The funds have not been technically obligated. So we're kind of in wait mode on that, which will drive timelines for us in terms of what we decide to do for that project. And then finally, the Inflation Reduction Act, they're going to be defunding that. We were expecting $800,000 for the town campus geothermal project. We're applying to get that still. We're going through the process to get the refunds that we're expecting. But we also have a little over $2 million for the new school that we were hoping to get back because of that geothermal system. That was going to go to reduce debt. We don't know if that's even going to be an option now because of the attempt to defund the Inflation Reduction Act. So these are just things that we'll have to work through our boards and figure out how to move forward and how we address this. Do we pay for this locally? Do we cancel projects? Do we just wait it out a little bit? And, hopefully this will get ironed out, but we're just in a kind of temporary state right now, not knowing specifically what to do. The next project is on the referendum projects. Madison School Renewal Plan is at Neck River is going to be opening in June. So that's just humming along. Brown continues to see most of its upgrades completed. They're doing a little bit more work this summer because we'll see the redistricting happen, not redistricting, but reconfiguration happen for the new school year. Polson, it's in design phase and they will start doing actual construction in 2026 on that project. But obviously we're going to have to see how this generator project impacts that timeline. So we're a little bit, because I know everybody wants to get the air conditioning, the building completely air conditioned. And obviously the auditorium upgrades are important things that the public is waiting for. So we're hoping that that's not going to delay this project. Academy, we've had a lot of conversations about Academy, a lot of meetings. The board, because of where the bids came out, when we went out to bid in the fall, way beyond what we thought, where we thought we were going to be, and we were kind of surprised by that. So then the board opted to, well, let's try to take the grants that we received and apply that to the budget. And so that will require public approval to do that. So our board kind of adopted a timeline. I'm still on the other slide, Jeannie, just so you know. The board adopted a timeline to go out to referendum May 6th, which is our budget referendum, and to ask the public's permission to apply the grant funding to the project budget. One of those grants is tenuous right now because we have not gotten a confirmation from the USDA about the status of that grant. So I think we're going to have some conversations about how we want to move forward with this. Our hopes is that it'll get resolved and we can still stick to that timeline, but we're not 100% sure. So that project is unclear. And I just want to highlight why, because I know a lot of people still have views about what happened with Academy and why. There's a whole presentation we had about this, but I just want to highlight the fact that, there were a number of factors that led to this budget deficit really that when we went out to bid. One of them is the cost escalations. Sorry, I gotta move that. So this is just what I showed at the Academy meeting. A lot of things that weren't necessarily built into the budget that went to referendum that they discovered. after we started moving forward in the process with the building that had to be added to the project. All these kind of factors came together and, we just hit a problem with it. And we've seen this in a lot of construction projects that have been going on. And with that, really just to highlight, I think this year, I should say, our focus is going to be to continue to, first of all, capital projects. One of the things we've talked about is priorities. We have guidelines, but we want to kind of really look at how we prioritize capital projects moving forward. The CIP committee is actually coming up with kind of a scoring, a way to score capital projects. And they'll bring a recommendation to our board, and then we'll talk about how we utilize that going forward, because I think a lot of people try to understand, like, well, why did this project get moved forward but not that project, or why did that get pushed back? So we're going to try to put a little more meat to that and have more of a formal scoring system for our projects. And then also, I think continue along with the Madison investment plan. It served us well the last couple of years. And then I think continue with the strategic plan, really focusing on how do we keep achieving the objectives the community's asked us to achieve. And so could be through programming, it could be outreach, it could be, physical investment in facilities. So all those things, we're always mindful using the strategic plan as kind of guiding us. And really that's kind of where we are. We'll continue to focus on town operations and staffing realignments. And I guess I would end that with, I think it's been a really busy, active year for the town. I think we're in a good place, but we got a lot of challenges ahead. So with that, I'm happy to open it up to questions from the public, and know that we'll answer what we can tonight. And if we can't answer it, we'll try to, get you an email. But I ask you to stand up and state your name and address, and also just keep your questions and comments to 2 minutes. And order of time. Jeannie, you're good for taking notes on questions?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So, okay, please state your name and address. And
Janet Nicolini, 8 Madison Avenue. I have a couple questions. First is, can you help me understand why we already bonded for Academy? I think you said $30 million in bonds. Well, we haven't even started the project yet. Why would we incur that expense so early? Second question is, with all these initiatives that may not be reimbursed with the federal grants, what is going to be your procedure to really prioritize this? I mean, we know we need an emergency shelter, right? So does that $1 million get used from the undesignated funds, because we know we need that, right, no matter what, versus the emergency communication center, which we've lived without that all these years? Is that something that can wait? So what is going to be your procedure to kind of decide what goes first?
First thing is, we did not bond $30 million for Academy. We issued $30 million in short-term notes and then $24 million in long-term bonds. Of the $24 million of long-term bonds, $6 million was related to Academy. We have to forecast for the next year. We knew we were going out to bid. We thought we were going to be in construction, and we needed to have funds available so we could meet all our obligations for the construction project. So we had to start ramping up for that, just like we did the school project the year before. So this is all cash flow forecasting. So you have the money to make your, you pay your bills. So, and it's only $6 million, because we looked at the timeline, and then we do kind of cash flow analysis, and we come up with kind of we work with our bond advisors as well. And I encourage you to go look at the prospectuses that were issued for the town of Madison bonds, because it'll break out tables of all this and explain the projects. So that's that for the Academy. In terms of the process, I think it's going to be a board discussion. I think it's going to be weighing a lot of different things, like, just the federal grant's kind of out there. It doesn't mean we've lost it, but we have to make a decision. Do we go ahead and move forward with the bid in the hopes that we'll still get it? And if we don't, know that we might have to pay for it out of fund balance. We will have to front, but these are all reimbursement grants. I also want to highlight, none of them they don't just give you a check and then you get to go off and spend it. You submit for reimbursement. So I think that'll be the conversations with the board, because the timing is important. the bidding process is important. And in anything in the schools, if you miss that summer window, you're stuck waiting another year. So that'll be a Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance conversations about that, and like how to prioritize and also lay out the timing of when decisions are gonna have to be made. Because we could get an email next week saying it's gone, or we could get an email and say, you're fine. So I think that will be an important thing that we will be kind of dealing with on an ongoing basis over the next couple of months.
It'd be nice if we were to get, I think, all the responses from the federal government all on one date, but unfortunately, we're not. So I think we're sort of at the mercy of responses, and they're all one-offs at this point, so.
But you may have to go ahead anyway.
Yeah, so
With
it's,
certain
there's
ones,
overlapping,
because,
yeah.
right. Just one follow-up on the
Yeah.
grant, the $6 million bond for the Academy School. In the event that project gets canceled, or that the referendum does not approve more money and you decide you can't really do anything with the 15.9 million and the project gets canceled, what happens with those bonds?
So we talked about this at our meeting when bond counsel was there, but effectively, I think we would have to then take that funding and use it to pay debt service over time, and there would be some costs associated with that. If Stacy, is that correct? Yeah. Yeah, so basically we have to take that money aside, and then we would have to and unfortunately, it's not a great situation to be in, because you're incurring costs, you're borrowing to pay off debt, that it's not cost effective, but that's how we were told we would likely have to handle it. But we would have to explore that in a much more detailed way, I think, just to sure, because there's tax implications, these are tax exempt bonds. So we'll have to figure that out, like how we can comply, since it's tax exempt bonds that were issued. Any other questions from the public? Yes, please stand, name and address.
Jim Schwaltz, Jonathan's Landing. Couple questions. You were saying that we deferred a lot of maintenance. Why did we decide to defer the maintenance?
Well, this was going back 20 years. So I don't know. There were a lot of decisions made. I think people were just concerned about the costs. And so, we have, if you look at our school buildings, you should go look back at the conditions assessment 10 years ago. They were done in the school buildings. So there were a lot of maintenance decisions that were deferred, and we just kind of worked along. Well, everything's working okay. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, kind of thing. And then it breaks, and then you can't get the parts, So we kind of did that for a long time, I think, just to keep our budgets at a modest level. And then I think there was also a little bit indecision about what direction to go in terms of the school plan. We had one that went to referendum that failed, and so I think all of that kind of culminated with a backlog.
You're just talking about building maintenance, right?
Yeah, you had a report done by DRA for you, and it had all the buildings in the town. Is that being followed, or is all of those addressed and in CIP, or is that falling into a deferred maintenance category again?
No, they were all incorporated into CIP, and then we started going through some of them, saying, okay, that report got as detailed as like a $5,000, fixture repair, or they would say electrical upgrades. I was like, why would you upgrade, So there was some stuff in there that I think, as our new staff came in this last year, they really combed through it to say, okay, what is, a maintenance issue that it has to get done, roofs, boilers, that kind of stuff. And then there's kind of this list of other stuff that you try to get done when you're making other improvements. So, that's conversations that happen every year as we go through CIP, kind of going back and forth and looking at it, but we always looked at the DRA study.
And I think the new facilities committee also, that we just put in place will also leverage the DRA study in conjunction with Peter and his team. I think to sort of look at
that's
all
gonna
of
be
those
part
things.
of their review, because they actually are now putting together, they're looking at every building, and they're looking at operating costs, maintenance issues, and they're looking at the DRA study as a benchmark for that. So that's all being evaluated.
But is all of that like in the CIP now, or is there stuff that's not?
No, but there's a lot of stuff. Like I said, it was a very detailed thing. First of all, CIP only takes projects as a 25,000, I think. Is that where Stacy
So
is?
some of the low.
Why are
low
you
stuff, we have
hiding
to-
all the
we
way
have to-
back
we have to
there?
fund it.
But yeah, so usually it's, the lower dollar amount stuff is just a spreadsheet that they track some of the stuff and they keep an eye on it. That also had an ADA component to it.
Yep.
And, you know, you look at ADA and you say there's things where you're required to make ADA upgrades, and there are things that it's more, as long as you're compliant with current code, we don't do those upgrades unless there's something else that triggers that. So, so it's a whole hodgepodge of stuff.
And then on the academy slides, the reasons you're stating for being over, you had a report done in 2019. Tom from QAM actually sent you a letter. It's part of that report stating that the electrical, plumbing, all of those needed to be removed and completely replaced. That was in previous reports. There's reports going all the way back to 2004 that state that the septic system was the original from 1936. And that was going to be needed to replaced in 2004. These were all on the academy site, on the town site. So it's like nobody looked at these things. We spent, you know, from what I can figure, $200,000 to $300,000 to do that report in 2019. We hired Colliers, the same people who did the report, QAM. You have Felicia Smith, which was working for Colliers at the time, and she's there. So it's kind of insulting that that's the excuse that you're being used, is why things are over budget. I mean, that's what your slides are saying.
Look, I mean, there was a lot that transpired on Academy for many years leading up to the referendum. We looked to our advisors, Colliers, they put a budget together. They said, this is what you would have to do to renovate the building into a community center, okay?
Yep.
And that was the budget that we took to the public. So if we, you know, now we're looking at having gone into a building that has basically been shuttered since 2010. Okay, so 2010 is when they stopped, I think it was 2010, when they stopped having water.
2004.
Well, they closed it in 2004, but in 2010 is when the town made the decision to not take care of that building. There was no heat, there was no water, so there was a lot of deterioration that started to happen to a lot of things.
I understand that.
Well, you know what, this is not the forum to have a debate about academies, okay, I've
I'm
answered your
I'm
question.
having a debate about your slide.
Well, that's fine, and I'm telling you that we went off the advice from Colliers at the time when we went out to referendum. But there was a lot that has transpired from when the building was closed down to when they actually went in and had engineers in the building and did deconstruction. So
But-
they're coming, look,
The things on your slide were the things that were done before referendum.
so that,
Those were known
I am going by what
issues.
Colliers told us,
They
most
told you in
recently.
2019,
Yeah.
you have a letter.
So we can have I don't know what letter you're referring to, but I will say,
I think I
Things have
emailed it to
changed
you
a
and the
lot.
board.
I
I'll
don't know.
re-email it tomorrow.
So that's fine, send me the email,
It's
but
in the
this is,
2019
we're not having a
report that you
debate
paid to have
about,
done
we're
with a
not
nice
having a
model.
debate, I appreciate your question, I tried to answer it the best I can, I cannot offer any further information.
Okay,
All right, thank you. So is there any other questions?
Dana Schmaltz, Johnny Planning. I have a couple of observations and a couple of questions. First of all, you're talking about, I'd like for you to define staffing realignments. What does that mean?
So typically, if we wanted to add a position, we look for savings in other areas where we might have reduced hours, or we had unfilled positions sometimes. So we just didn't, we survived without those positions filled, so we just removed them from the budget. If you look back to.
Or couldn't find good candidates. also.
Yeah, usually it's like you couldn't find good candidates, there's a lot, it was hard to hire people, frankly, in the last couple of years. So, and if you go back to my previous budget presentations, I always have a slide that talks about staffing changes, and that would outline what those realignments are.
And what, maybe you can explain to me, what is the purpose of a police social worker?
A police social worker basically acts as, somebody who, if there's a family in crisis or an issue, they help facilitate with the family, and they make sure that the family's getting services to assist them that are not just law enforcement services, but other social services.
We
And-
pilot tested this actually with
Yes.
sort of a combination between youth and family and police force. And they came back and recommended to us that it was something that was needed.
Who did?
Scott Cochran from Madison.
And,
Family
and the
their
chief of
board,
police.
And their board.
And the chief
and
of
the chief of
police.
Police recommended
So,
that?
yes,
Absolutely.
the chief of police, yes,
Yep.
Social worker?
yes.
Yep.
Yes.
We wouldn't have hired
Can you
him, no.
confirm
Yeah.
that?
That was before my time. I think it was also a requirement of the police accountability bill that was passed, that towns had to have this as well. So I think it's come down.
It's not required
It's not.
right now,
It's
from
not
my understanding, but
required?
we thought it might be coming. A number of towns have implemented this, and our chief of police was 100% behind this. He thought it was a fantastic move.
Well, when we, especially from the pilot.
Yeah,
The pilot
because we
was
had the
hugely
pilot
successful.
and they saw how valuable it was and they collected data and they had, it was only a short period of time that they did this and they thought it was very successful, so. But I'll refer you to the police department and Madison Youth and Family about that.
And maybe just to expand a little
Yeah.
bit, so successful is a domestic call, domestic dispute, the police of course go. They're the primary responders to that. The follow-up can happen with a licensed clinical social worker. That at a level that the police wouldn't be able to do, and with the diligence that the police wouldn't be able to do, all with the idea that it wouldn't repeat, that they could get to the root of the problem and solve it. And it was that philosophy that caused the police commission, the chief, and Madison Youth and Family Services come back and say, this has been very successful, and even the rank and file officers were standing up saying that they were very, very happy with the program.
So the one thing we've seen in situations like that is we have different regulatory bodies, whether it's blight can sometimes be an indication for some other issues, and then that can also transpire into, law enforcement being called a lot, or the ambulance services being called a lot. So we're trying to be a little bit more holistic and because right now, the way everything's structured, it's all silos. So you have people that are kind of interacting with government in silos, and the attempt is to try to, bring this all together so that you can figure out how to solve the problem. So, any other questions from the public?
Angela Grosso, Horse Pond Road. Is Collier still involved in the Academy School project?
As of our last meeting, the board decided we were going to take their services for the next phase in-house. They kind of supported us with the bidding phase, and we know the project budget's constrained, but we also made a big investment this last year in a construction manager who started with us July 1st.
That's Ben Whitaker.
Yes,
Who is at fault for this project going off the rails? Is it Collier's? Is it this administration? I think the people need some type of transparency because every aspect of normal construction procedures has not been followed on any of this. And as Jim mentioned, all this was brought out by Collier's, that the septic system, the electrical, so on and so forth had to be addressed, okay? Had to be done, Peggy, okay? We just need to know who was at fault here. If you pay Collier's hundreds of thousands of dollars, okay? And they didn't recommend this to you, and I know they did because I've seen the letters, then they should reimburse the town. If not, you should need to tell us who
look,
messed up or screwed up this whole project,
I think
because
that-
it's a mess, Peggy. It's off the rails.
So thank you for your comment.
I know you don't want to answer it,
It's
but
not an answer
you
because
need
there's.
to be transparent
I
to the
think you need
citizens.
first of all, the fact that you have all this information
Yes, I do.
shows transparency. Everything has always been available to the public. Any decisions at Academy has been made in a public meeting. So that alone demonstrates transparency.
Not at all.
You've been able to get everything you want and everything has been provided to you.
That's not
So,
the town.
I
We
think
did our
that
own
we should
research.
once again, this is not gonna be a debate about Academy. We all know your views because we all are on Facebook. And so I think it's just not productive to have this conversation here, but thank you for your public
Legislating could be
comment.
difficult.
Anybody else would like to make a statement or ask a question? Thank you. Please state your name and address.
Terry Van Adolder, Bartlett Drive. First of all, I want to say I can truly appreciate that it's very difficult to plan in the current environment that we have where funding is a big unknown. So, and that's not just here, but it's everywhere. So we understand that. What I have is more of a philosophical question. and it's directed to each of the board members. Unfortunately, Jen isn't here. I don't know if Matt would want to speak for Jen or not.
She's
but-
Jen's iPad
She's
is on.
on virtually.
She's on.
Yep, I'm here. I'm online.
Okay, good. Hey, Jen.
Jerry.
Here's the philosophical question, and it does tie into many of the comments here tonight. There's a common concern among many Madison residents who sense that board members will not divert from committing to a project once money is spent to evaluate the feasibility of a project, even when data resulting from such a study shows that such a project is too costly, is unreasonable to pursue, or the public really doesn't want it. Would each board member, please, not just the chair, although I do value your opinion, each board member, please comment on this and tell Madison public taxpayers your thoughts on this and where you stand personally. In other words, is your vote in support of any project totally committed once money is spent to study or evaluate? Or do you truly have an open mind to reevaluate a project's reasonableness as new data comes forth? And as the public says, maybe they don't want it. Thank you.
I truly have an open mind
Thank you.
in any of these situations based on new information. Specifically, the new administration is a great example. We don't know the situation with grants, how that may impact not just Academy, but many other projects in town. Absolutely willing to reconsider, look at projects, replan, whatever we have to do, and we're willing to do that. We just are in the process right now of understanding all of those variables as we speak. So I think we're in a little bit of a bit of chaotic times right now. And we don't know what the variables are.
Before this meeting started, we voted on to move our budget forward. And I did it with the comments that there were some projects in the CIP that I still have concerns about, that I still want to see the board revisit. Not because I'm concerned about their dollars per se, but just the need. So, Terry, I would say that there you have a lot of qualitative kind of framework in your question. And I think what's been my guiding principle specifically to Academy, because I think that's what's on everybody's mind, is that regardless of how I feel about that project as a taxpayer, I have an obligation in this seat to follow through on the wishes of the people that voted for the project. And until such time as we come to a quantitative analysis that says the project isn't viable, our mission is to deliver a community center. That's what the taxpayers who voted told us at referendum. And I quite frankly don't see a way to undo that. If we get to the point where it is quantitatively unreasonable or not possible to complete the project, then we're gonna have to reevaluate. But we're just not there yet. As frustrating as that is, to me as a taxpayer, and to me as a selectman, we just have to take the information as we get it and make the decision when we have the right information.
It's also easier to stop projects that haven't started yet too. So I think, that's also a conversation we'll have to have, is looking forward. There may be projects, that we may be able to stop that we just haven't invested in yet as well, so.
And I would just
Can we just let these guys finish?
Yeah,
Terry, your question is very philosophical, and so I have to give a very philosophical answer. Life happens, things change, new information becomes available, and I pride myself on recognizing that it's always time to reevaluate a prior decision. You've often heard me say from this chair that sometimes today's problems are the result of yesterday's solutions. I recognize that. I've been in office a long time, and some of the problems the town government has today are the result of solutions that made a lot of sense to prior boards of selectmen a decade ago. And I'm quite willing to recognize that it's time to understand that life happens, the situation has changed, there's new information available.
Jen, do you want to weigh
Yep.
in?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, overarchingly, I have a very open mind to considering all possibilities. And, to specifically answer the question, do I feel that a project must be carried through just simply because money has been spent on a feasibility study or, some of those investigative type processes? Absolutely not. That's why we have those feasibility studies, is to find out what exactly it is we're dealing with, and if it's something that as a town we want to move forward with, as a voting public, is it a project that people want to move forward with or not? And just because something may be feasible to be done, if the public votes no to it, then I'm going to have to support that, uh, regardless of what my own personal feelings are on a particular project. Because when it comes right down to it, we are a town meeting form of government, and when we take projects to referendum, everybody in the community has the opportunity to vote yay or nay as we move forward. But overarchingly, to answer that question, just because money is spent, no, I do not feel that I would be obligated to vote yes to moving anything forward if new information becomes available and leads me to believe that the project is no longer in the best interest of the community.
I would also like to give my view, because I think we are always looking at projects and reevaluating them. For example, we know we need to fix the town garage, and we need to get Beach and Rec, this building and grounds, out of the surf club. We have millions of dollars of equipment just sitting there with no shelter for it. And we don't have adequate facilities at our town garage for the Public Works Department. The original plan that came back was going to be like $7 million. And we said, that's crazy. So we've been looking at what options, how do we look at this differently? How can we, should we do look at a different site? That site is 2 different levels, right? So it's going to cost a fortune. And then we're going to have to move a water main. There's a water main that runs right through it. So we went out to the water company. Can you help us on the water main? That was going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I think you think that there's just this rubber stamp process that happens. There's a lot of deliberation and dialogue and research that goes into a lot of these projects. And when it comes to the board in the capital plan, they're vetted pretty well. But then things happen outside, circumstances that we can't control, and then we have to step back and reassess. The one thing I have tried to do is, because we had this backlog of project, is find other ways to pay for it. That list of all those things that we got accomplished this last year, most of them were funded with outside money and not local CIP. They would never have happened if we had not gone after those grants. So I think that you see all this spending that's going on, but the reality is we're not paying it through our capital plan. A lot of it's getting funded with outside resources. And I've always said, the spigot's been on the last couple of years. Let's take advantage, get our buckets out and get every drop of water we can get out of the spigot, because it's gonna get turned off. It's getting turned off now. So now we're gonna have to reevaluate and step back and start prioritizing, because some of the grant money is maybe not gonna be there now going forward. But I'm glad we made a big dent in the big stockpile of projects, right? We got stuff done. So I think we should be proud of that. And now we have to look at the reality that we're living in now and decide how to move forward with the projects that we have on the list. So we're all very thoughtful and deliberative about the decisions we make. Galen, I know you want to make a comment. Galen is the chair of our CIP committee.
I'd like to provide an example from my perspective on the Board of Education and CIP, which is that we had initially made a $3.6 million ask for the 25-26 CIP. And this had been in the planning document for a couple of years. And the Board of Selectmen reviewed it and requested that we find some reductions. And we were able to reduce that to 1.6 million through a combination of state grants, delaying projects, spreading them out. And it was pretty significant, finding some savings in other places. So I think it's a pretty good example of the board's ability to reconsider things. And I also have to say that the facilities department and the finance department did wonders in finding those savings. So it was kind of a team effort in that respect.
No, and I think having a construction manager on board to work with our new facilities director, they found a lot of ways to save money. All those returns that are voted on are how they found savings and, moving stuff out of accounts and putting it back into the master account so that that can be used for another project going forward. So any other additional, there's some hands raised online, so we have to kind of we have one hand raised online. So Jeannie, if we could go to online.
Go ahead, Andrea.
So I'm sitting here and this all
State your
sounds
name and your address.
Andrea Mastaloni, 36 Concord Drive. What I just heard was spend until the spigot is turned off. I'm going to say a few things here. Stop bringing up Donald Trump and Doge as your problem and your reason for all these problems. That is exactly not why this happened. And using it down and saying that we're not taxed. We pay federal taxes. Are you kidding me? I sat here for an hour and I was so calm at the beginning and listening to this joke of just make-believe land on that, oh, we don't pay for it, it's a grant, it's this. No, we pay for it. I have a real question here. Can you explain to me why Madison Youth and Family Services was unwilling to appoint a Republican to their board? They were so afraid of Doge and Elon Musk and all the stuff you guys are speaking of. And you are making this real for people. You are scaring people. Do you realize that? What you are doing is completely dividing a town. And you say you can't spend money because of Doge and Elon Musk and Donald Trump. I've lived here for I don't even know how many years. I'm about to cry, but not really like the online people that are crying and like leaving the country. You have made this as insane as Chris Murphy has made our entire state. Please stop it. Why can't a Republican be on Madison Youth and Family Services?
Thank you for your comment. I will just say that was discussed extensively at the board meeting. So, you can watch that meeting. In terms of all I've explained here today is the reality on the ground. And I have to be transparent that we now have funding that we counted on that may not be there now. And there was a reason for that because I have emails and letters from the federal government with literally those explanations in them that state why we're not our funding may not be approved. So we're just explaining the situation that we are and many that are facts and it is something that we will have to make decisions on. I recognize that federal funding is federal taxpayer. I'm a taxpayer too, but I'd rather have it being spent in Madison, Connecticut than in somewhere in Florida or California or in New York. So I'm out there advocating for our town and trying to get as much funding as possible. We just had a conversation about how the state doesn't provide Madison enough funding, and we've been pounding the table trying to get more money, and that's what we've done through state money. So it's the same discussion. And we're just always trying to do the best for our town and get as many dollars into the town so we can complete our projects. Thank you for your comment, though. Any other hands raised online, Jeannie?
No, there are not.
Okay, and I guess a few more minutes if there's any second or first comments. Yes.
Jim Schwartz. In the last referendum, there were a couple of things. So as part of the academy, you were going to have a committee put together, put out a report of what was going to be done with the existing Madison Youth and Family building. And also a report of the potential revenue streams and programming and everything that was going to be done with that. Was looking for the status of those, as well as in the presentations for the new school and the budgets for that, there was, I think it was 1.6 million for the demolition of Ryerson which turns out was not actually in the referendum. So it got switched somewhere between there. And then with Academy talking about
You
change.
know, let me just say that you have a lot of specific questions. I suggest that you email them, because this could be.
When I email, I don't get responses
You
back.
get a lot of responses. I think my staff and everybody has really been responsive to you. And we are very well that you put a lot of FOIA requests in, you ask a lot of questions, and we are very, I think we've been really responsive. So I'm happy to
I mean,
answer
those
those
are things that
questions.
are all affecting the
Yeah,
town.
I understand that, and I'm just saying that you're getting into a lot of very specifics, and so I think it's just better to put it in writing and we will respond to you. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, and then with, one of the things like, you know, Academy always feels like round peg, square hole issue. Maybe, you know, we committed to a community center, maybe Jeffrey can be that. You know,
So
maybe
we
that's
have,
the
we
thing.
have a facilities committee that is, and its mission is to be looking at all the town facilities. And depending on where we end up with Academy in terms of the referendum or other choices, obviously, those conversations can be had with the facilities committee and they'll make a recommendation to the board of selectmen. So,
Okay.
thank you.
We've got Surf Club, which is gonna be a big
Okay.
project, which isn't being addressed
We're actually starting a master planning process for the surf club this year.
in 5
Yes,
years
please.
out. You're putting the money in for a study and a plan. It's at the end of the CIP that you just posted.
Name and address for the record again, please.
Andy Valorosa, Horse Pond Road. Quick question.
Yeah.
Ben Whitaker's our new construction manager in the town.
Yes.
I'd like to get an answer from everybody on the board. Thank you for the idea. Are you gonna follow his recommendations?
We make decisions with a lot of recommendations, and that's really,
He's an input.
yeah, he
He's an input.
provides a major input, but.
I mean, obviously, he's he's going to be the expert, so.
Okay, so
Right.
basically, if he's told you already that you should not proceed with the academy school unless you remove all the toxins, the asbestos, the leads out of the place. If you do not, you're opening up a can of worms. And I'm quoting it.
You know.
Are you gonna follow his advice? Because it's
Are
very
you,
critical.
are you having private conversations with him
No, it was
as
a
opposed to in
BOS
public?
meeting.
Because
It
that,
was a BOS meeting.
he didn't say stop.
Oh,
the
yes, he
project.
did.
No,
He
he
came
did
in
not.
halfway through your
No,
meeting.
he did not.
Okay, I'll send it to you, Scott, right?
Please.
Yep.
All right,
Yeah.
all right, guys, you know.
I mean,
this
we
has
know
been-
more about what's going on than the
Yeah.
board does. What's going on here?
So
I'm sorry
anyways,
to
any
break my
other
voice,
questions?
but
I think, you know.
this
we've
is
had-
critical, Peggy.
We've had 45 minutes now of question and answer, and
Unbelievable.
I think we've allowed a lot of people to speak, and, you know, so is there anybody else who has not spoken that would like to make a comment or ask a question? I'm happy to. I mean, you've spoken and asked a question, but
Just one comment.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hold on. Yeah, go ahead. I heard one of the members say that you feel that you are dedicated to deliver a community center. But from what I understand from the design and the allocation of the spaces, to me, it looks like it's a government municipal building without the community center part. And I'm just putting that
Absolutely.
out there.
I mean, I have to say, you've made that comment many times. That building has what, almost 40,000 square foot, and there's 6,000 dedicated to youth and family services and maybe 1,000 to beach and rec. So I don't know why you keep coming up with that number, but I'm happy to give, you know, the floor plan. I understand your concerns about that. And it was presented to the public as a community center and a municipal building, and that was part of the explanatory text that was issued prior to the referendum, and it was part of the public presentations that were given prior to the referendum. But, but I understand you've raised that concern at a number of meetings, and that's where I guess it's a little frustrating for us, because a lot of these things are continual comments that we understand where your concerns are. You know, you've attended the meetings on Academy, you know, you're very vocal out there in the public about these issues, so we're well aware of them. But I appreciate you coming out again tonight and sharing that, and if there's any other further questions.
I have a
I think,
question.
okay,
And I
yes,
also have
please,
a
yeah.
couple of comments I'd like
Yeah.
to make. First of all, I understand your frustration, understand our frustration too. Okay, you sit up there and you roll your eyes and you all giggle and, poke fun or whatever. We're frustrated too. We work really hard. I can speak for all the people sitting here. We work really hard and we've taken our time to try to understand what's going on. I don't care about Academy right now. I came in tonight knowing that this wasn't a meeting about Academy. But when you just said that there's it was gonna cost $7 million to house the equipment that we need to maintain the field, is that right? To maintain the field?
No, that was their proposal. That was their
No, that
proposal.
was
Okay.
the
They came in with a
original
proposal.
And
plan.
$100,000
agree
for
with
a water pipe.
Right.
And that to me sounds more reasonable than spending this ludicrous amount of money on a roach that's sitting on Main Street right now. Take that, we need those things more than we need other
I
things.
think we understand that, but that's why Academy was sent to referendum back in 2022.
And it's
For
changed.
20
I'm
I
not finished
understand it's
speaking.
changed,
I
and
am
you-
not
and-
finished speaking.
Finish
Listen, you've
your
spoken
comment.
enough tonight.
Yes, I did. I
You
did.
And you're frustrated and so am I.
Yeah.
Now I want answers.
Yeah.
So
So-
this is like,
Okay, but
you
I
spent, the
have to,
referendum,
in order to answer your question, I have to speak, right?
I'm not finished speaking yet.
Okay, well, go ahead and finish your question.
The
and then I will have an
referendum
answer
for
when I
Academy
finish.
has expired for more or less. You are not delivering what the voters voted on. You're not. Like I said, I didn't come here to argue about Academy tonight, but when I hear the other things, first of all, Garvin Point, that was a deal made with the state for beach passes, okay? So grants maybe, CIP maybe, okay? You take money, you borrow money. It's like you're robbing Peter to pay Paul is what you're doing. How about fix the things that we have? Get a tool shed up for our equipment that needs to be done. Spend the money there. You spent $402,000 in a gymnasium floor in the arts barn that nobody's gonna use because we're gonna have this new gym in the academy. We're spending a ton of money on Polson Auditorium when we're gonna have this beautiful, auditorium and academy. Why are we spending this money on things like that when other things need attention first?
All right, well, thank you for your comment. I understand you feel differently. The priorities should be differently. Obviously, this all goes through a public process. The boards vote on these things and it goes to the public, and other people might feel differently than you. But we
Well, that's
vote on
obvious.
how we as a community vote on these things, and it's approved by voters and it's approved by the board. So I
And approved
appreciate,
by that capital improvement.
and the CIP plan. So it is,
It's very thought out, I
it
guess.
is,
It's not
there is,
like-
and I think this is where, when I talk about frustration,
It's not.
when I talk about frustration, I think the biggest thing that's frustrating is we have incredible town staff that do a lot of amount of work and thought and analysis.
Yeah, because
We
there's
have
6
dedicated
committees.
boards that work through all this and spend a lot of time outside of the public meetings that you attend. Some of them, but there's multiple public meetings going on, and these are processes that take years sometimes to lead up to when we actually get a project going. So,
Because you're kicking
and
the can down the
factors-
road.
but that's the whole point of why we were here. We did that for 20 years. There was a backlog, and we're trying to get those projects
So you're
done now,
blaming everybody
so.
else that came before you.
But anyway, tonight is not to have a debate, so with that, I guess,
have another
I think we're done with the,
One more. Now I have one more statement.
you have
The
one more
FOIA
question,
Yes, I
okay?
do. The FOIA requests,
Yeah,
we don't get answers to those. We don't, and you know what? That's illegal, just so you know. That
all
we
right,
know
well,
that
thank you.
too.
I will look into town staff, but my understanding is everybody's been very responsive
Well,
and
with your
followed
two, I
up,
believe
so.
you have 2 administrative assistants
So,
now,
uh,
perhaps they can work on that.
I don't have 2 administrative
She doesn't have 2
assistants.
administrative
The person that's ultimately responsible for FOIA is our town clerk, and she makes sure that we respond, so,
Right there.
Where are the FOIA,
so,
where are they?
FOIA requests come into my office, the town clerk's office. There are times that they go directly to other departments, and in turn, they will send them to me so that they can be logged in our office. If I get a FOIA request, if I have the information, it goes directly out from my staff to the person that requested it. If it's from the other departments or people that have the answers, the request is sent to them to then answer. We have them all logged. And my understanding is at this point, there are a few that are being worked on, but any information that had to go out to anybody that they had available to them has gone out.
Not from last March,
So-
2024.
so.
Why don't you,
yeah.
why don't you write me specifically, if you would, and let me know exactly what is still outstanding. If there's information that people have, they get the information out. If it's something that they're waiting for, or that's people are not, if it's not open to the public, then that maybe is why it hasn't been answered. But my understanding is all the others have been answered.
Got a quick question.
So if you would like, just write me directly. Thank you.
Got a quick question for you.
So-
Why was a citizen of this town quoted $3,000 to get his information on a FOIA? And then after he pushed back, because you were gonna do, attorneys were gonna review it all, why
it was
did you
not-
end up saying no
I
charge? when
think
you
this,
pushed back?
this is, as you know,
Yeah.
Nancy can
I can
respond
respond if you
separately.
like.
This is about the state of the town presentation. I think we've answered a lot of these questions. I'll try to, I know there's a hand or two online. We'll go back to
I can talk
online
to
to
you
answer
afterwards.
this, or to ask, allow others to ask questions.
I also, I mean, just
Go
listening
ahead,
to the.
Susan.
No, wait,
Oh,
just-
go ahead.
Can we get a meeting where we can ask questions and get answers for like a couple hours?
It sounds like
Okay,
you-
this is Susan. This is Susan Glantz on 682 Green Hill Road. I just want to say that there are some people who really appreciate all the hard work that the Board of Selectmen and the rest of our boards have put into all the projects and this presentation, and I just want you to know that you are appreciated by some people. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Very much.
I guess there's one more hand raised online for a second comment.
Second comment, Andrea. Go ahead.
I guess she's,
You're muted.
Can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yeah.
Hello. So I appreciate anyone who volunteers their time in a public forum, position, works for a town. We have a lot going on in our town. I have one other question. How many female officers are on our current police payroll?
yeah, I don't know that number. We'll have to respond to that in writing, so.
All right. So I would like to know, when you respond to that, how many are on the payroll? How many are being paid? And how many are active? That's my final comment there. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, we allowed people to speak twice now. Is there anybody who hasn't had a second comment? Okay.
So I understand that you all are concerned that the public voted yes for Academy School for $15.9 million 3 years ago. In 3 years, we have had the town gym renovated. We are now having Polson renovated. The library has tons of programs. The senior center has tons of programs. Doesn't it occur to anyone that maybe what the public voted for 3 years ago has changed now? And that maybe the public deserves another vote with the way the town is now offers all these things, that they understand that they're given all this information, and then they're asked, do you still want and need a community center? I think you're all saying you want to do what the public wants, but that's outdated by now.
Well,
That's my question.
okay, well, I guess my thought is, first of all, they also voted on a new school, right? And so are we just gonna decide, we don't really need the new school, we should change the whole redistricting plan because we have more kindergartners.
That's
enrolling
already
now.
been in
So
construction.
I'm just saying, but there's improvements that haven't even started at Folsom yet that were voted on. So these projects do take a while, but that's not to say that the board is not hearing all this. That's what all of you have come and given public comment. We listen to what you say. We're all aware of what's going on, but we have to factor that in, and we have a lot of other things to factor in, and then we make decisions. So we are listening to everything you're saying. It's not like we're this, but we have to factor that in with a lot of other things, and then we make decisions. And so, I appreciate your comment on Academy. I think we've heard this multiple times, and we understand that people feel that this is, time to change, and we should rethink the project. We've had multiple meetings to talk about that, and we're gonna have to continue to talk about it because we're now in a little different situation with our federal grant. But thank you for
I
that, your
appreciate
comment.
your answer. Thank you.
So, any other, everybody's had a chance to talk twice. With that, I guess, are we fine? ending the meeting.
Yeah, maybe just a
Yeah.
quick positive note at the end, but at the end of the day, I think if we harken back to the beginning of what Peggy articulated in the plan, or in the state of the town, there's a lot of strengths to our community. There's a lot of positives that are going on. I feel like, a lot of the questions were sort of cast in sort of a negative light. Yes, my hope is that there's also a perception that there's some really good things going on in town as well. And I feel there is, and I know the board itself is very proud of a lot of the things that are going on. So I guess, it would be nice to start hearing some of those comments as well. So anyways, that's my thoughts.
When we only have a few
All right,
minutes
so,
a year to discuss it in front of you, it's.
All right.
You text me all the time, my friend.
Yeah, so I think we'll try to be as responsive as we can. All right, well, thank you
You
very
rock.
much to attending the meeting. And I'm sure we'll be hearing more thoughts as we go forward. So thank you.